Let me tell you a quick story about the only class I failed in high school. It was junior year, fourth quarter, room 207, Miss Facette. And the class was 1:30 to 3, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Can you guess what the class was? Public speaking. And the reason I failed the class is because I was a student, and still am, someone who has very high levels of presentation anxiety. And I'll talk about that a little more, but I thought I'd share that little piece of hidden information about me and self-disclose and move it into the open window. And what are we talking about in this screencast? We're going to really start the speech process, and specifically, I'm going to just go over the 10 steps and what they are, just a really quick overview. I'm going to talk about presentation anxiety and square breathing and how to manage it a little bit. And then we're going to get into topic, thesis, and value statements and what those are, and really to get you guys started in the process of creating your first informative speech. And that is the goal. In this unit 2, it's to get you all to do an informative speech in front of the class and to upload it to Jing. So let's get started. As always, don't forget to tweet. If you heard something in the lecture, write it down, edit it out, make it look good, and tweet it out there. Hashtag CO1011. And also, as always, I'm encouraging you, like we see SpongeBob here, take notes, focus in. Look how locked in he is. But take notes. Use this as an opportunity to take notes and pause if you need to, but ultimately keep that handwriting and take lots of notes. So good luck. Here what you see in this slide is the 10 steps to creating a formal college level presentation. And really what the idea is, in the next couple weeks and over the semester, you're going to go through all these steps and create your college presentations. In this screencast, we're going to focus on selecting topic and talk a little bit about audience. But in step 3, it's about research. And ideally, you're researching from academic search engines. I think the statistic now is 99% of all students get their information from one place, the internet. I'm going to try to discourage you from doing that and move into library search engines. All of you have access to the library here at Landmark, and there's plenty of great search engines there to help you. Collecting your research and supporting materials, developing your main points. What are your main points in your speech? Organizing your speech. We'll talk about organizational patterns. Constructing your introduction and conclusion. This is probably one of the most important parts of your speech, is your intro and conclusion. Wording your speech and how to word it appropriately. Rehearsal, which is the final stage, and once you're done with all the other preparation, you're going to rehearse it, and we'll talk about that. And then lastly, get up there in front of the audience and present your speech. Now, all these 10 steps are located in chapters 14 through 16. I'm going to talk about some of them in a screencast, but most of these you guys can read about and get tuned in on your own through the textbook. If you have questions about any of these steps along the way, you know to reach out to me as well and let me know. Let's keep going. Let's talk about the Personal Report of Public Speaking Anxiety. This is an international test that measures people's levels of speaking anxiety. And really what we're doing is all of you hopefully have taken the Personal Report of Public Speaking Anxiety or will take it, and you'll get a score. And it's really to help you understand where your current level of anxiety is, and then we'll get into how to manage it. So let's talk about what this test is. And you can see this guy over here. He's fairly nervous, and you're seeing some presentation anxiety symptoms. One, he's got his fingers in his mouth and he's biting his nails. He's also sweating profusely from his forehead, which could be seen, if he's aware of it, or if he's unaware of it rather, that would be maybe blind self, that he doesn't know he's doing it. And a lot of the presentation anxiety symptoms that people present are in the blind self. They're nervous tics, they're movements that we're unaware of, and it's because our nerves take over and control some subconscious movements of our body. But let's look at the personal report of public speaking anxiety. Your score should have ranged somewhere between 34 and 170. So let's talk about each score. If you scored in the 34 to 84 range on that self-test, you have very low levels of anxiety. You're actually quite unusual to the general population, and about a little less than 5% of the general population has low levels of anxiety. The second scoring range that is significant here is the 85 to 92. If you scored in this range, again, you're only in 5% of the general population, and you're classified as moderately low levels of anxiety. And so, think about this. A total of 10% of the population has low levels of anxiety. Not a lot of us. So if you scored under 92 on that, you're unique in that you have low levels of anxiety, and good for you. But that's not most of us. The next score range is 93 to 110. This is moderate anxiety. If you scored in this range, you score as well as 20% of the general population. So now we're getting into a more normal category. 20% of the general population have moderate anxiety. And that's no small feat. You're amongst, a significant portion of the general population. From 110 to 120 is moderate high anxiety, moderately high anxiety, excuse me. This category represents 30% of the population. So as we look at moderate and moderately high, you've got 50% of the population. Statistically speaking, most of us probably should have scored in this general category, or at least half of us. But that's a significant portion of people. The last category is 120 to 170. These are people with very high anxiety, and this constitutes 40% of the population. And so 40% of the population, almost half, have very high presentation anxiety. And what I think is important to recognize about these people, like myself in Miss Facette's class, junior year, 1988, in high school, is that these people go to great lengths to avoid any sort of public speaking at all, including not showing up for school, doing the Bart Simpson, "Oh, Mrs. Krabappel, I can't take the test today." And these people go to great lengths to avoid any situation where they'll have to speak publicly. So you can look at where you stand on these scores. And I guess if I were to summarize this slide, as you can see, according to these statistics, and these are true nationally tested over and over, almost 90% of the general population has some form of public speaking anxiety. What does that mean if 90% of the people have it? It means that it's normal. Public speaking anxiety is a normal thing that most people have. And so if that's at all reassuring to feel like you're normal, hey, if you're in the other 10%, you're abnormal. So most of us are normal. Also, I'll just say this about the people with high anxiety. You want to really think about creating an environment where they feel safe and they can present their ideas in a place where they feel like they're being listened to. Let's move on from this. More on anxiety. So how do I manage these anxious feelings? What do I do now that I know it's normal? Now that I know I've got to do this college level presentation, how do I manage it? The first thing you do is you gain experience. And you gain experience under the right conditions, meaning that you're taught how to do it. What is the formula? What is the skill to do it? And you gain experience. And over time, you get better at it. Now, when I got to college, I realized during that time I wanted to become a teacher. And because of that, I actually realized that, you know what, I need to get over my public speaking anxiety. And I just made that choice to get over it, to deal with it, to gain experience. And once I gained experiences that put my voice out there and put my ideas out there, I became much more comfortable with it. The next thing is, one way you manage anxiety is you be conversational. And as you can see, these little guys over here, anytime you're doing public speaking, you're talking almost the same as if you were talking to one or two people. You're really maintaining a conversation. It's not reading from the page. It's really knowing what you want to say and focusing on your ideas and expressing them in a conversational tone. So, public speaking really will sound very much the same to one person or to two people as it will to a room full of people, but you want to be conversational. The next thing in terms of managing presentation anxiety is breathing. Statistically, when you look at anxiousness, the fight or flight theory, where your nervousness goes up in situations that make you nervous, you want to breathe. One of the first triggers for anxiety symptoms is forgetting to breathe. And usually people go into short, shallow breaths, which then triggers other physiological symptoms in your body, such as sweating, heart rate increase, sweaty back, flush face, shaking hands. And we can go down the line on all those presentation anxiety symptoms. But what you want to do is you want to remember to breathe. And one of the techniques that I like is called square breathing. It's very common. You could probably find it on YouTube and get some more demonstrations of it. But square breathing rebalances the levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen in your body. And when you forget to breathe in anxious situations, that's what happens, is you really create an imbalance of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And so square breathing recalibrates that, and it gets people to focus on their breathing and not on the nervous situation. Our flight or fight syndrome goes all the way back. It's a genetic response. We're DNA programmed to have this response. It goes back to our ancestors who had to defend their families in the cave with spears from the saber-toothed tigers. And so this is a genetic response. Nowadays, it's not saber-toothed tigers and spears. It's getting in front of a classroom of people. And so, but the managing it is the same, and that is square breathing. And breathe deeply and slowly. And so how does square breathing work? I guess it starts right here. And you breathe in for 4 seconds. Once you're done the breathing in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. And then you breathe out slowly and deliberately for 4 seconds. And then after you breathe out, on the out, you hold for another 4 seconds, and then you repeat. I've practiced square breathing, and when I've gotten really good at it, I've gotten up into the low 20s actually on each count. So if you think about really taking a slow, deliberate breath in, hold that slow, deliberate breath for 4 seconds, breathe out slowly and deliberately, and then hold, and then repeat. By doing this method, this is scientifically proven to reduce all your anxiety symptoms. So when you start to feel getting anxious, maybe right before your presentation, maybe the class before, definitely the person that's going before you, start the square breathing process. And I encourage you to try it in other situations too. If you're someone that has test anxiety or other anxiety triggers in various contexts, try square breathing. I'll be curious to know. Give me some feedback. See what you think. Moving on. What does the audience see? And this is really interesting. If you go back through and you look at some of those anxiety symptoms, what I want you to know about when you manage your anxiety is that most presentation anxiety symptoms are not seen by the audience. So think about that for a second. If they can't see that you're nervous, why should you worry about it? And the things that they do see when you're nervous, like maybe your hand's shaking or you're rocking or you're scratching your leg or rubbing your beard. I had a student last semester who would constantly fiddle with his beard the whole presentation. Once he became aware of that, we moved it into the open window and he was able to stop and put his hands in a more comfortable position. Other things like nervous stomach, heart racing, sweatiness, and flush face, most of those symptoms, or feeling flush, most of those symptoms of anxiety are not seen by the audience. And so your perception that they see them is different from their perception. They don't see them. So if they don't see them, don't worry about them. The last thing I tell you about managing anxiety is practice. We're going to get into rehearsal. We'll talk about rehearsal strategies and how to practice, and also embrace speaking opportunities. Every speaking opportunity you get in the future, take it and run with it, because you want to gain experience. You want to put your voice out there. You want opportunities to communicate and become a better public speaker. There's a lot of benefits to becoming a great public speaker. So those are some ideas about how to manage your anxiety. Let's talk about topics, value step, and thesis a little bit, and this will get you started on your actual presentation. First of all, in terms of what you choose for your informative topic, I want you to choose something that you know a lot about and that you love. And maybe you don't know a ton about it, but you love it. But both of those categories you should be able to lean towards, and pick something that you know about and that you love. I really want to get people doing presentations on things that they're comfortable with, so you get used to the structure and the how to do the presentation. And right now it's less about doing something that you're not familiar with. So pick something you're familiar with and that you love and you're passionate about. And I would say that's true for a lot of presentations. You can tell when a presenter is passionate about a topic versus when they are just doing it as an assignment. And so that's what I want you to avoid, is if you're looking at this as, well, it's just an assignment for CO 101, you're really missing an opportunity. You want to give your audience something that is of value to them. And so one of the things that I would like you to think about doing is brainstorm these topics. Take your note page, hit pause, and brainstorm as many possible topics that you could do an informative presentation about. Also, come up with a thesis statement. A thesis statement is just a basic sentence, doesn't even have to be a sentence, of your central idea. What are the main points what's the main idea of your entire speech? You're going to really summarize it in less than a sentence. And so that's your thesis statement. Tell us what you plan to argue. That's another way of looking at a thesis statement, is it's your argument. What are you planning to argue? Can you say it in one sentence or less? Who's in our audience? This is something else to think about. Who are we? What are our demographics? Who are you talking to? Ultimately, when you give presentations, you're going to hear the word audience-centered. Any good presentation is audience-centered, meaning that you're not thinking about self anymore. You're thinking about who's listening, who's in my audience, and how am I constructing a message for them so that they understand it, so that they're taking away something of value, so that I give them something that they appreciate. And so this is where you kind of move out of your narcissistic, self-oriented place and start to think about, who am I talking to and how do I make a message that appeals to them? What we do is we talk about what is called a value statement. It's also called a value step, and it really has to do with thinking about the audience and why they should care. So in any presentation, it's always good to tell your audience specifically why should you listen? This is what you will gain out of my presentation if you listen. And really tell them explicitly why they should care. There's nothing worse than being in an audience and wondering why I'm there. What's my purpose here? Oh my God, why am I here? As a speaker, I think it's your obligation to tell the audience explicitly why they're there, what they will gain from it, what benefit it is to them to hear your speech. And so we're going to have you do a value step in your discussions coming up. But value step, tell your audience why they should care. Here's some examples of speech topics, thesis statement, and value statements. So speech topic is the history of the Nalgene Bottle Company. Thesis statement, to inform my audience on the evolution of the Nalgene Bottle Company. So pretty basic sentence. This is what I'm going to argue. I'm going to tell my audience the evolution of the Nalgene Bottle Company. Value statement. Does anyone in here use a Nalgene bottle? Can I get a show of hands? Great. Today I'm going to tell you about this company's fascinating history and some other interesting things about this organization. And many of you are holding this bottle right now and using it every day. And so again, there's your value step where I've made a connection between my topic, my thesis, and my audience and why they should care. Speech topic, smartphones. And this guy is using his smartphone. Thesis statement, benefits and challenges of owning a smartphone. So there's your thesis statement. I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons of using a smartphone. And the value statement, I plan to tell you about how this technology can change your life. And so right away, it's like, do you want a life-changing information? I'm going to give it to you today. So that's my value step in a general way. So these are just examples of what you're going to do on the discussion board. So let's wrap it up. Talked about the 10 steps, and you're going to read those in the chapters. Talked about the personal rapport of public speaking anxiety, so you had a little more context on where you stand and what it means. And we talked about managing presentation anxiety, some tips on managing it and thinking about it, knowing that it's normal. And lastly, we talked about topic, thesis, and value statements. Get your tweets out there. Hope the note-taking went well. And thanks for putting up with my screencast.